Ooh, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to get some running water in the truck and install a real flushing toilet that drains into my black tank. Step one is figuring out where I need to drill a hole for that sewage line to come into the black tank. Now it's pretty tight up in there underneath the truck, so I use a little bit of spray paint to mark out where the grommet is hitting the tank, and then we can remove the tank for drilling procedures. With our hole marked, I need to figure out how to get a center line punch in this so that this hole that I drill is centered. If it's too significantly off, it's not going to line up with the pipe coming out of the toilet, and there's a possibility that it's not going to line up when I put it back up underneath the truck. We really don't want that because I don't want to have to re-drill this hole multiple times. So I use a smaller hole saw that go inside the grommet to punch a center line, and then I can drill the real hole with the larger hole saw. Next up is drilling a hole for our ventilation. Now, as soon as I drill this, I realize that I used the wrong size. I think in my haste, I attached the wrong size hole saw. So I immediately start thinking of recovery procedures. How can I get this hole patched? And my gut reaction is to use PL3X, of course. So I slap a little PL3X on there in preparation to reattach that cap while I re-drill the real size hole to fit this ventilation grommet. Use a little bit of Gorilla Tape to hold the cap in place while the PL3X dries and hopefully gets that adhered. Spoiler alert though, in the end that didn't actually work. I had to go back and use ABS glue, which did end up working. So PL3X, not so great on ABS.
Nice try.
The final hole we're drilling here is for the tank level monitor. This is a Coos level monitor that's high resolution. It's going to give me great readout of how full the tank is at any point in time. And I'm installing it at the deepest part of the tank. Now this black tank, I think most black tanks are sloped. They have a built-in slope. And I'm installing it at the deepest end so that it gives me an accurate measurement of how full my tank really is. This extends almost all the way down into the tank, about an inch from the bottom. And it's a fairly simple installation. Drill a hole and then attach the monitor with 5 screws and a gasket. With all the holes and everything we need in the tank, we can put it up back underneath the truck. Surprisingly, that grommet was fairly loose. It had a little bit of play in it, and it was very easy to get that set and attached to the pipe coming out of the toilet itself. Next step is installing the black valve. This black tank's no good unless there's a black valve to hold everything inside, so I'm going to trim out a little section from the box of the truck to fit this valve. The placement ended up being quite convenient. It was basically like I imagined it in my head when I was planning the tank placement. I will be able to reach down underneath the truck and easily pull this valve to open the black tank whenever I need to. I will mention that for some reason ABS plastic pipe is almost impossible to find locally, so if you're going to be trying to install this and making one on your own, plan on getting everything you need online. We're using ABS plastic to attach just a 3-inch connector here to attach the valve itself. Doing a little dry fitting just to make sure it fits before I put the actual glue on there, because once that glue's on there, it's on there. This thing wasn't even able to rotate after about 10 seconds of being attached with this glue. This is serious stuff. Anytime I need to open the black tank, I can simply reach down, pull the valve, and close it when I'm done. With the black tank installed, we can move on to getting some of the internal plumbing components prepared. This is the Pentair SureFlow pump that we're going to be using. We're going to be placing a little sediment filter in front of it and then feeding it directly into an accumulator. You can see that I've got the filter attached with the flexible hose into the pump. You're going to want to use flexible hose. Anything that's attached to the pump itself, you're going to want to use flexible hose with to reduce the vibration because this hose is flexible. A lot of the noise that comes from the pumps is actually the result of the pump channeling vibrations into nearby components. I chose this particular pump because the reviews made it sound like it's one of the quietest out there. And now the purpose of the accumulator is to prevent the pump from running as often. It keeps the lines pressurized even though the pump itself is not running, and it provides a little bit of delay between drop in pressure in the line and then actually having the pump kick on. So my original plan is to have a split coming directly out of the accumulator, one line to go to the faucet kitchen area and one line to go to the bathroom area. So the water is going to come in from the tank, go up through the filter into the water pump through our flexible hose into the accumulator and then down into the splitter for the rest of the truck. Next step is getting the actual fitting attached to the toilet itself. We're using a PEX female brass fitting here to prepare that to accept a PEX piping. On the fresh tank itself, I've already got a 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter going into PEX, and then I'm placing a check valve directly after the tank here. This check valve prevents the water from falling back down into the tank whenever the pump is not running, which basically keeps the lines kind of primed and makes sure that pump doesn't have to do so much work as that water comes out of the tank every time it needs to turn on. The check valve ensures that the water will only flow one way.
And then I need to go 8 inches from there. Or 9 inches. 9 inches.
You guys know one of my favorite things to do is drill holes through the bottom of the truck, and we get to do so yet again. What we're doing is creating a cavity for both the gray water to come back down and the fresh water to go up. The only problem with this extension for the hole saw is that that extension has a little bit of play in the bit itself at the end, so when you're dealing with very tight conditions in metal, drilling through metal like that, the loose head locks it up quite a bit. I'm not actually able to go all the way through with this hole saw because the head is a little bit too loose and it keeps getting jammed up in the tight metal floor itself. So we'll come back and cut a hole, finish it through the bottom. For now, I'm going to install my basic setup here. You can see that it changed a little bit here. I added a cutoff valve directly after the accumulator so that I can actually turn the water off to the entire system if I need to. This is my first time ever actually working with PEX pipe. I gotta say I really enjoyed it. It's flexible, it's easy to cut, it's easy to attach. I'm using the crimping clamp system. There's multiple systems you can use to attach PEX pipe. I figured that the crimp system would probably be the easiest and the quickest way to do it. So that's what I went with. Here I'm just building out the rest of the line itself. We've got the main pump feeding into the faucet area on one end of the splitter, and on the other end of the splitter it's going to be going to the PEX pipe that I've already got in place going into the bathroom area. All in all, it's a fairly simple circuit. The amount of PEX that I had to install to get everything functional is quite minimal, and I'm happy with that. I'm plugging off the hot water for now because I'm not going to have the hot water heater installed yet. This is just basic cold water installation right now, but a hot water heater will be going in the future. Using my pre-wired 12-volt line, I'm attaching it to the pump to get some power and fastening that line to the wall to prevent any kind of vibration or prevent that thing from moving around. Okay, so I gotta cut right here and right here. Did I go far enough? Oh. Clean hole right where I wanted it on the bottom of the truck. I was proud of that one. My measurement skills were on point on that. Once my plumbing is complete, I'll likely be filling that hole that I made with some spray foam insulation, potentially some liquid rubber. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I will be sealing that hole to prevent those pipes from rubbing up against the metal and to seal it from any kind of bugs or any other things from getting inside the truck. And back inside the truck, we can go ahead and trim that and then prepare the intake line to the filter end of the pump. It's very possible that this is not going to be the final setup for my overall system as I troubleshoot the inevitable issues that arise in the future. But for now, I figured this is fairly functional. It's going to take a minimal space in the back of my cabinets here. Let's get some gray water going. So the first thing coming out of the sink is a one-way valve. This kind of takes place of a P valve, which is the purpose of that is to prevent any kind of smells or odors from arising out of the gray tank itself. This has a membrane inside that will do that same job in a more slimline form. And we're going to use some tubing to attach with elbows all the way down into the gray tank. This tubing was also quite easy to work with those clamps. I had to get back under the truck and flip my gray tank because the inlet was on the bottom and we need the inlet on the top. So a quick dismount and remount on that got us in the proper positioning to accept the gray water intake from the sink. The hardest part about working with this tubing is actually getting those fittings in because they are quite tight. And in small situations like this where you don't really have much of the tubing to work with, it can be a little difficult to get those in. I chose a black tank method for this build for multiple reasons. Number one, the first and main reason is that I'm simply not going to have to interact with human waste at the frequency that someone with a composting toilet would. Secondly, I love knowing that there's simply no human waste inside my living area. There's just a nice peace of mind knowing that all the human waste is physically separated from my living area. And finally, another big reason is that it just feels more like a house. Again, I've said this multiple times in multiple videos, but the point of this whole entire build is to make this thing feel as close as possible to an actual small house. A flushing toilet with running water gets us one step closer to that. With the tubing installed, we've got a functional circuit coming in from our sink into the gray water feed. Next step is to install an actual valve on the bottom of the gray tank so that we have a way to empty this when we want to. For now, I'm going to use a manual PVC valve, but eventually in the future I will be installing an electronic ball valve that I can control from inside the truck. So we got to get some water in the fresh tank to test the whole system out. This is clearly not a permanent solution. This is going to be one of my biggest problem-solving situations, is figuring out how to get a permanent freshwater fill into not only this tank, but the other tank as well. Because remember, I got another 40-gallon fresh tank on the other side of the truck. So for now, as a temporary solution, we're going to be using a little bit of extra tubing and the power of gravity to fill this tank. Now, the reason I'm not using final components like the electronic ball valves here is because I was actually getting ready for a little weekend camping trip, and I wanted to have running water for that trip. So this was more of a last minute kind of rush to get working water and toilet in the truck before I do that. But this is definitely not going to be the final state of my water system. We've got water and we've got a pump. We're pretty much ready to use the toilet. We got to get some PEX fitting attached to that, get a line going through the wall, because right on the other side of that bathroom wall, I've already got PEX line ready to go that runs under the floor into the sink area. If you guys didn't see the installation of that, you can go back and watch. I believe that was in the heated floor installation video where we run those PEX lines through the floor. Forgot to mention this earlier, but another advantage is that this setup with the black tank and the flushing toilet is actually a fraction of the cost of a composting toilet. So you're going to save a lot of money as well. I'll be attaching this to another T-fitting. The other end of that T-fitting will be going to the cold water shower mixer. I will say the only complaint I have about the PEX crimping system is that it's a little hard to get pressure enough to crimp those in certain tight situations. So luckily my voiceover is hiding a lot of the grunting and groaning that I'm doing as I'm getting these crimps in place. And with the toilet fastened securely to the floor, it's finally time to turn on the pump and get some pressure in this water system. There were only a few minor leaks that I've easily fixed by tightening those clamps. But we give it a little test run and see that we've got functional faucet, which means we should also have a functional flushing toilet. And the way this toilet works is a half press on the foot pedal will fill the bowl with water. A full press will flush the contents into the black tank. The system has some issues that I need to work with. The accumulator does not work properly. I don't think the pre-charge on the air pressure in there was enough for the water pump that I have. So I'm going to have to figure that one out, get that tuned. But we still got a lot of plumbing left to do with the shower and the hot water heater. You'll be seeing those in upcoming videos. As always, guys, be sure to go visit my private community over at technobarbarian.locals.com. We've got a growing community of van enthusiasts over there, and you can always ask me questions if you're doing your own build and you want some consultation. Thanks for watching this one, guys. We'll see you on the next one.